Hey everybody, this is Pastor Chad with FBC Missions So That Podcast. So glad that you're going to join us today. I have a great guest with me, Bill Macleod from this time. He's coming from Phoenix, Arizona. I know him from Portland, Oregon, so it's really great to have him with us. Hope you enjoy our podcast. Hi, and welcome to Season 4 of FBC Missions So That Podcast. This is an encouraging place to hear how God is working in and around us. We know that He blesses His people so that they can bless the world around them. Why is God working in our life, church, and community? It's so that through us, the world will know that He is near. Hey everybody, welcome to FBC Mission So That Podcast. Thanks for joining us today. I have a good friend here in the studio with me, Bill Macleod. Bill, welcome. How are you, sir?
Hey, it's great to be here. San Antonio.
Yeah, this is Boerne. So I'm going to tell you, these Boerne people don't like being connected to San Antonio.
That's right.
This little town is about 20,000 people, and it has been a small town, 10,000 people, until just the last 8-10 years. Wow. And San Antonio keeps getting closer. So then they're like part of the San Antonio Metroplex. And people from Boerne just kind of cringe at that every time. I'm new to Boerne, so I've only been here for 18 months. But it's a fun little town. Down in the middle of the city, there's a square. We drove past it a few minutes ago, and there's a statue of Wild Bill Hickok down there on the bench. And people talk about Boerne like it's this little Texas town where people have ranches and horses and farms and those kind of things. But it's quickly becoming part of the greater urban area.
Not as wild
of San Antonio. Yeah, not what it used to be. For sure. Well, welcome. It's great to have you with us.
It's so great to be here, and the fact that you are leading this, and we met so many years ago, and we were both younger then, and then to find out that you're leading this class, that was amazing.
It really was a wild thing. Let me just tell you, we had our full 15 instructors set up, and then we had a lesson 5 person back out. So then I was trying to shuffle, and one of the guys, the one to do 15, was here in San Antonio, said, "Hey, have you ever taught lesson 5? He said, "No, but I've taught lesson 6. So I was supposed to teach lesson 6. Yeah. I moved to 5. He moved from 15 to 6, and then I had this opening at 15. And I'm like, I got a few weeks. So a couple of weeks went by. I invited a few people. They weren't available. Invited a few more people. They weren't available. And finally I said, "Matt, who's your 15? He's like, "Bill Macleod." You're like, "You got to be kidding me." Bill Macleod, like from Portland. He's like, "How do you know Bill?" I'm like, "How do you know Bill? You're in San Antonio. What in the world?" "Oh, we've been having Bill come for years." Well, let's find out if he's available. So it was unbelievable to me that you were available, that you were able to come, and we're so excited. Just kind of let everybody know, all the way back, early 2000s, I'm a young missions pastor at a church north of Seattle, and I was probably a little full of myself. I thought I knew what I was doing. And I was part of a team that was helping bring an organization. We were trying to put together an organization called Missions Fest Seattle. It's a big event once a year for a lot of churches to come and talk about what missions was and what's good practices, best practices. We brought in some big speakers. One year we had Steve Saint and George Verwer, some of these famous, amazing missionaries of the past. Well, one of the guys that was counseling us and really coaching us as we were going, kind of get it started, was this guy, Bill Macleod. And he had started the ministry that was Connections Northwest. Missions Connections Northwest.
Well, it was Missions Fest Northwest then. We were associated with the group in Seattle or in Vancouver.
Yeah. Missions Fest Vancouver and Missions Fest Portland. So we were trying to start Missions Fest Seattle, modeling it after these other two. And Bill was coaching us along the way. So I met Bill years and years ago, a couple times in these meetings, and listen to this, at Missions Fest Seattle, that inaugural year, is where I found a little booth that talked about this class called Perspectives. And then I learned how little I knew about the world of missions.
It's all of us, yeah.
Yeah. Like you were talking about when you first took the class, you were already coming off the mission. Tell me how did you find Perspectives?
So I worked for a couple ministries. I worked for Luis Palau overseas. I worked for Promise Keepers. And then I was coming on as missions pastor at my church. And one of my missionaries was home on furlough, said, "You have to take this Perspectives course." And I'm like, I got a lot going on. Whatever. I've got to do a lot of stuff. No, he says, "You really have to take it." So I started in 94. I took the class in 95. And I said, how is it that I've been through Bible college and seminary, and this is the first time I'm hearing this stuff? This is life-changing. It really did change my whole perspective, my whole view of the world. And I said, if I don't do something with this. If I don't teach it or at least try to, I'm going to lose it. And so that's how it started.
So you started teaching. You became an instructor. So how long, you told me a little while ago, how many years have you been teaching now, instructing for Perspectives?
Well, let's see, 96 was my, so it's 28 years now.
28 years.
Incredible.
That is incredible. That is incredible. Well, I took the class for the first time in 2006 just outside of Seattle there in Edmonds. And it shook me up too. I was a missions pastor, took the class and realized I had a Bible college degree. I've been leading mission trips and I had so much to learn. And using Todd Aaron's words, it ruined me for the ordinary,
Amen.
right? Like
Amen.
it just shakes you up and you're like, I don't think I'll ever be the same.
Yeah.
I was introduced to the word mobilizer.
Yep.
It like fit me to a T.
Yes.
Like as much as I loved missions and I wanted to be a missionary, like this, like, oh, now what I know how God has gifted me, it's to call people to the nations for the rest of my life. And it's local, it's domestic, it's international, it's whatever God calls us to. And you've been living that out now for a long time. So tell us, you said Luis Palau, Promise Keepers, and then you started this thing, this Missions Fest that later on became Missions Connections Northwest. Tell us about that.
So I was part-time missions pastor at my church. I was having a ball with, leading Promise Keepers up there. And my church came and they said, we want to hire you full-time. So I took a day to pray and fast, one day to pray and fast. Lord, what should I do? And had the opportunity to continue to do what I'd done in Portland for Promise Keepers, to do that around the country. It was early days of Promise Keepers. The Lord allowed us to be successful at that.
Yeah, it was a huge movement there for that season.
And I had this choice, and I sought the Lord, and I won't go into details, but the Lord gave me a vision. I wasn't given to visions, but the Lord gave me a picture. And from that, I'm like, what's this? I'm praying like all I need is like a yes or a no, from the Lord. But he gives me this panorama. And it had to do with mobilizing. You just mentioned that word, mobilizing. And from that picture, I said, okay, I think that's the Lord's answered me on this one day of prayer and fasting. So I said no to Coach McCartney. I said, I'm not going in that direction. I'm going to go with my local church. And there was something in me that wanted to create something, like not just do the same kind of conferences. I'd kind of done that with the Luis Palau Association too, but actually to create something where we could, really mobilize people in the local church. And so I went in that direction, accepted that invitation to go on staff with my church. But that picture that the Lord gave me was what would eventually become Mission Connection, what I do full time now. But it took years. I mean, I let it sit there. And then over a number of years, pretty soon I felt the urge to share this idea, this vision with other friends. I had a number of friends. We prayed probably 2.5 years before, again, it felt like the Lord was pushing us to try something. And so our first public meeting was 2001, and then with pastors, about 300 pastors. And then we launched the event, which at the time was like Missions Fest Northwest. And then a few years into it, we changed it to Mission Connection Northwest. And now the organization is called Mission Connection, and the event is called Mission Connection Northwest. And then we're in our 4th year. We expanded to Phoenix. That was part of the reason why I moved to Phoenix, plus having some grandkids down there. And so Mission Connection Southwest coming into our 4th year, November 1st and 2nd. But we've always been the 3rd weekend in January. Wonderful time. If you've never been to the Northwest, it's wonderful to come in January.
Of course.
It's really cold rain. There's rain throughout the year, but it's cold rain. And that's where we get the real serious missions-minded people.
Of course. You're going to come out in that weather. You got to be dedicated.
That's right.
But it's so funny, even Missions Fest. I remember how it was like the whole Christian community showed up for that event. I think the first year we did it, or I think it was the year at Steve Saint, there was maybe 12,000 or 15,000 the aggregate count. And we were just amazed because we figured it out that the 200 churches or so represented a very large component. These are the Christians of our city pouring out together.
Yep.
You bump into them, you realize this Christian community is very small. In a large urban area, the Christian community is very small. And that's really true about the Northwest altogether. So the work was incredible. The one thing these churches would be willing to talk about together is the world missions, right? It's what God's doing across the nations. We know that none of us can do it alone.
Yeah.
And so working together was such a big part of it. And really so much of your work has been founded on that kind of idea. As we were driving over here, you told me some of the different elements that are part of Missions Connection now. You were talking about some things that were short-term trip oriented and different. So what are some of the different parts, maybe different arms of your ministry? It's not just an event anymore. I mean, the event is big, but there's a lot more to it than that.
Right. Well, of course, over the years, we had our major event in January, but then, we would do other smaller events. Now, our major events are always free because we want families there. We don't want people, oh, man, do we have the money to go?
Yeah, of course.
Everybody there. It's like a World's Fair, basically.
Yeah.
But we do charge for smaller events. And over the years, we still have Leadership Connection, which is drawing church leaders. We've got Short-Term Mission Connection for people that really want to focus on how to do short-term missions well. We've done Crescent Connection, which is how do we love our Muslim friends and neighbors.
Yeah, of course.
Whole focus on that. We've done Care Connection. We've just expanded Care Connection up to Minneapolis, Minnesota. We acquired an event up there. They wanted to come under our banner, so now we've got Care Connection basically in Minnesota.
And what is that?
That's missionary care. How do we, the love, care, and feeding of the
of your workers
on the field?
Yeah, of course.
And that really has always drawn from around the country, even though it's a small sub event, task oriented. And then we have Student Connection, which is, hey, how do we get junior high school, students involved in missions? So that's that. But a few years ago, right during the pandemic, one of the guys on my board, Brian Heerwagen, was over a pretty significant national ministry called Standards of Excellence in Short-Term Missions. And he said, neither one of our organizations are needy. Like, neither one are hurting for money. Like you said, the people come out. But he said, what would it be like if we could join forces because of the resources we could bring, And I just said, wow, that is really interesting. And so we began to pray and eventually took it to our boards. And a year later, April 1st of 2021, we merged the organizations, and I think a year after that, we rebranded everything, and so it was called Mission Works.
Okay.
And then under Mission Works, Mission Connection, Mission Guide, Mission Linked, Mission Armor, and Mission Excellence. Well, Mission Excellence is the Standards of Excellence piece. Basically, how do you do missions well?
Yeah.
And then Mission Connections, like the big front door. Everybody comes, whether they know anything about missions, but we get them in the front door of Mission Connection. But then they say, oh, I really want to go on a short-term mission. Well, here's Mission Guide. This will provide 600, trips led by churches or organizations that are in partnership with us.
Okay.
And it's almost like going on, Delta Airlines website. Like, here's all the destinations.
600 trips, all different regions of the world.
Different parts of the world, different times of the year, the whole thing. And then a lot of times people say, well, I got to raise money to go on these trips. So we've got Mission Linked. And this is a platform that will help leaders especially get their teams in place so that they can raise the funds.
Yeah, fundraise and get their support base ready to go and prepared for the trip itself and all those things.
And we had one church actually that wanted to, they were planning a trip, they got on board. All the money came in, like, I think more than 6 months in advance. And they
Incredible.
said, this thing really works.
That's fantastic, yeah.
Then a lot of times, once things start getting serious in missions and all of a sudden the church is planning a short-term mission trip, usually the executive pastor, the risk-averse people, they go, wait a minute, this is getting out of control.
You need how much money for these plane tickets? And they haven't got all their money in yet.
And isn't it dangerous? So, hey, we've got you covered. We've got Mission Armor, which is short-term mission insurance. Will cover all your insurance needs. And so that's all on our website, which is www.missionworks.global, and it's all there.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's amazing. And that's what a growth pattern from, again, being a big event that was really, we're going to try to get as many agencies represented in your kind of gymnasium with all those booths and have some key speakers and really just try to encourage people to get involved in what God's doing. And now you've got all these tools to support them as they prepare, as they go, as they encourage others to go with them. And so what a cool thing. Yeah. Well, we have you in town for Perspectives. I'd love to talk about what a San Antonio connection would look like, but that's maybe for another day. But I'm sure people have asked about that at different times along the way. But tonight you're here to talk about our last class, 15 weeks. The class is it's funny. The last few weeks, everyone there, as much as they're excited to finish the work, they're sad that we're going to lose the class. You know, there's been you've got this community built. You've got this strong vision. You have this language. Now you've got people that know what you're talking about when you're talking about these things. And you talk to people outside the class and they look at you like, what are you even talking about?
Right.
You know? So like you like this little community that you have. And I've gotten several emails the last few days just kind of mourning the loss of the community. Like, what are we going to do next? Like, when are we going to get together, the class again? You're like, well, we'll do it. But so tonight, the topic is World Christian Discipleship. And it really tries to tie together all of this content and information and set a strong stage for what are you going to do when this class ends. Yeah. And so, Bill, give us a little introduction. What are you thinking about tonight? What are you going to say? And obviously, you're not going to have the 2 hours, so we've got 10 minutes, 15 minutes here. Just kind of give us a taste of what we're going to hear tonight.
Well, of course, what I love about Perspectives is I always say it starts with the universe and it ends up with you. Mm. And so for people that are listening, they don't know anything about what we're talking about. Perspectives on the World Christian Movement. They don't even use the M word. They don't even talk about missions. They say perspectives on the World Christian Movement based on, you probably said, 4 viewpoints. The first one, let's start with the Bible. You know, we're Bible people. So what does the Bible have to say about the World Christian Movement? Going back to Genesis,
Abraham, and
starting with John 3:16, going back to Genesis, and then so that makes sense. Then what do people do with it? Well, let's talk about history. How did history play out when people, when the Scripture ended and people now are going on Scripture, but now they've got to take this message. How did the World Christian Movement spread? Yeah. Okay, but what about when they hit kind of like the hard rock of, different cultures. Culture doesn't know what the Lamb of God, and they don't even know what a lamb is, and so how do you deal with that? How does this message keep moving forward when it's got those kind of challenges? And then finally you end up with the strategic session, and that's the section we're on for lesson 15, and it's okay. This is great. You've learned about the Bible. You understand how a biblical basis. You understand how people dealt with the message in history and then culture, how it's different. You've got, these different speakers representing each of these lenses. And now the last, 3 or 4 lessons are on, but what are you going to do about it?
How does this impact your gifts, talents, skills, the unique person that God has made you? Now, how do you live with all this knowledge in a way that glorifies Him, right? Right. Yeah.
So I'm qualified to teach a number of the 15 weeks, but I usually get asked to do 15, probably because of my experience.
It's a mobilizer,
And I do get excited about, about mobilizing. And I will stop everything, no matter what I'm doing, if there's someone who's interested. And that's what's so amazing, as with the Perspectives class, everybody's like, their eyes are opening up and they're going, how come I never heard this? Yeah, join the club.
Yeah, been there.
So the lesson is, World Christian Discipleship. And so there's basically just 4 parts of the lesson that I'm dealing with. What does it mean to be a world Christian disciple? We define, what does it mean to be a disciple, a world Christian disciple? You might say, well, I'm a Christian. Isn't that good enough? Yeah, we don't want to discourage anybody.
Of course.
But we want to help you understand, like, okay, how can I be a disciple of Christ and take this, what I've learned, forward in a way that fits me, not in just one size fits all. That's the other thing, that sometimes, there are people who they definitely want to do something, but they haven't heard an audible voice from God.
How do I know? How do I know what God's calling me to do?
Yeah, and then there'll be some of the classes that go, oh, God spoke to me, and I'm going to.
I've been waiting for you to say go, because I'm ready to go. Yeah.
And yet, I believe that the Lord speaks to every single person. So the first one is, what does it mean to be a disciple, world Christian disciple? But then, what are the practices of on that global Christian journey. If somebody says, okay, I'm going to be a disciple, what practices do I need to have in my life? Or at least need to be leaving this class thinking about the practices. Then we take a little break, and then we come back and we talk about the disciplines. So difference between practices and then being a disciple. Now, what are the disciplines? I asked the class last night in San Antonio, hey, what's the difference between practices and disciplines? And, well, just come on out. You'll find out.
Yeah, of course.
And then finally, to me, the most exciting part of the whole class is the final session, discovering, these are all D's except for practices, discovering your role in God's greater story. And I love that because I when I teach, I do a lot of interaction. I like to get feedback.
Sure.
And it's funny, I just tell people up front, if they're not used to the interaction, if you're here and you're not answering the questions, I'm gonna pick on the introverts. So you better speak up while you have the opportunity before I call in. So the discovery part is exciting because I remember when I went through it, the things that hit me. I'd grown up in Massachusetts, and I married a gal from Montana. Now in Montana, there were still real live Native Americans, real Indians that she grew up on. Well, in Massachusetts, we had place names that were either from England or they were obviously from some other tongue. And they were Indian names.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking my high school was named Wachusett Regional High School. Well, that name didn't come from England.
Right.
The Massachusetts itself. And it was like looking at one of those 3D pictures where everybody goes, oh, I see that thing now. And you keep looking at these dots and it's not coming in. All of a sudden it hits you and you go, oh, I see the ship. All of a sudden I looked and I saw all these people groups over all of New England. Then you step back and you look at the whole country and you say, we are a landmass originally 300 years ago full of people groups that were different from themselves, but there's obviously more uniformity with the United States, but back then and that weirdly, that was one of the takeaways for me. It was like this, oh my goodness, this is amazing. And then, really, I think I'm doing what I'm doing because of that vision the Lord gave me, and it all ties into perspectives.
I love it. I've taught 15 a few times, and I love it. It's one of my favorite classes. You feel like you do all of these other classes so you can get to this one, right?
Yes.
This is the one where you say, guys, this is where the rubber meets the road.
Right.
You're going to walk out of the class at the end of this night, and what you do from here is how you respond to God, His Holy Spirit that's been speaking to you all this time. And part of what you need to do is just sit back and think like you've been drinking from this perspectives hose now for 15 weeks. I joke that I so enjoyed week 12. I got a master's degree, in community development, and you can go back and really unpack any one of these lessons into a major, theological treatise. You can just go into any one of them, especially the last 7 or 8. They're so focused and so almost strategically oriented. And as you think through those things, you start to realize, man, God has made me in a very unique way.
Amen.
For the way that He's called us. And one of the beautiful things that I love about the class, it reminds me of this. Everyone loves C.S. Lewis still. He hasn't been canceled yet. Everyone's trying to figure out how to cancel everybody, but so far he continues to stay above the fray. And I love his book, The Weight of Glory. And there's a chapter in there called The Inner Circle. And he talks about how every organization is changed with the addition of one person to that organization. And he's specifically talking about Jesus' inner circle, right? Peter, James, and John. He said if you take Peter out, the inner circle is fully different, right?
Yes.
If you add in another one of the disciples, that inner circle is completely different. And it kind of just keeps talking about these kind of concentric circles as it moves outwards.
Yeah.
And it gave to me this picture of every time a new person walks into our church, our whole church is different, right? You bring in the dignity of the Lord embedded in this person in a unique way, and it changes the way the whole group sees God, right? And so often we silence those voices. We don't get to understand and know what God has done inside of this person, or what unique expression of God's glory is embedded in them.
Yes.
And so we start talking about personal dignity and all these things that God brings us in every individual human life. And perspective is one of those that's kind of like we're drawing them out. Like this is us wanting to say God has put himself in a very clear, unique way inside you. And we want to see how that looks when you pursue God with all your heart. And so this is those things like, what is it that God's called? What does it mean to be a world Christian disciple? How do you pursue following God? What are the disciplines you need? And then ultimately, what is it that God's going to do through you? How do you discover God's purpose for your life? Yeah. Those are the questions we ask when we're new believers. How many? I was a youth pastor for a long time. Were you ever a youth pastor?
No. I did enough damage as a missions pastor.
Well, missions pastors, same question. People come and say, I don't know what God wants. What's God's will for my life? Yeah. What should I do? Should I marry this girl? Should I go to this school? Should I pursue this career? Should I? Yeah. And all those questions are really asking the same question. What does God have for me? And how am I supposed to be faithful to what he's calling? Yeah. And when you come to the end of perspectives, that sets just real squarely in front of you. Like all that I've done. Some people, they're 30, some people are 70, and they're asking the same question. With all that I've done, what is God going to do with me next? Yeah. Right? What does it look like from here? And so that's just an exciting place to be.
And to have that expectation, too. I mean, how many times do we have to stop and actually take stock? Where, a lot of times just life goes by, and what a privilege it is when things happen. And, you and I have talked about all of a sudden we love this ministry, and all of a sudden, gee, I'm on the outside looking in, and I love what I did, and I was good at it. But that you find out, well, that was God's way of saying, I want to do a little tutoring for you.
Yeah.
Because I don't want you to just go down that and have everything,
sure.
kind of get used to it.
Sure.
And so it's a chance to stop and think, wow, if this is true, then what does this mean for me and where I am in my life right now? And then, to do it with other people that may be in similar life places and see how they're reacting. And it's a full body workout, man.
Well, here, listen to this. You're going to love this. In all my years of doing this, I took the class in 2006. I became the regional director in Texas from 2010 to about 2013. So been fairly intimately involved in Perspectives in different times. We've launched it in different places. Kind of every place the Lord places me, Perspectives is one of my early steps. Like, here's a good start. And so it's been really fun. I've been teaching now since probably 2010. So 14 years, half of the time you've been teaching. And it's been so exciting. And but in all of those years, I've never had anything quite like this class. I'm taking a mission team. We're going to Turkey and Moldova in June. Wow. And out of the 14, 10 of them are my students right now.
Amen.
So it's like a Perspectives class field trip.
You call it a practicum.
Practicum to Turkey and Moldova. Turkey represents one of the largest unreached people groups on the planet. The Turks, 10,000 believers among 85 million people. Moldova is the poorest nation in all of Europe, so you're going to see all the community development needs, all the issues that come with a country that's dealing with poverty, but they're really welcoming the gospel in so many ways. Wow. And what an incredible opportunity to get to take a bunch of Perspective students to go do this. And that wasn't intentional. They just happened to be members of the church who taken the class that are so interested in it. And so I'm so excited. We're going to walk through this book called Ephesiology that makes the case that the movement of God among the Ephesians is the greatest movement in the history of the church. Wow. And so we're going to walk the streets of Ephesus while we're studying this book that talks about the movement of the Ephesians. So awesome. Acts 19 and 20 all the way through of course the book itself. So it's I'm so excited to see what God's going to do.
And the fact that you could during the trip almost extend the Perspectives class and say,
really?
Hey, let's talk about discovering your role.
Yeah.
Any more clarity for you, Joe? Any more clarity for you, Cindy? That would, be more time for them to kind of think and be walking those
You also
roads.
get to look at a culture that's post-Christian, right? Turkey was one of the original Christian nations.
Yeah.
And now it's so far from that. And it gives you a glimpse of here's what it could look like if we continued to pursue our own things and we forget all that God's doing among us. We could one day see an America that is far from God and wonder what's left over. People could walk the streets of Moody Bible College and wonder how great this was.
They're going to be leading tours to America one day.
Could you imagine? We're gathering for the 50th Perspectives anniversary at Moody
Yes.
this summer,
Yes.
and just pray that God would use
Amen.
us, our
Amen.
people, our resources, and all that He's given us for His kingdom and glory. So this podcast is called So That, the So That podcast. So Psalm 67. God bless you and keep you, make His face shine upon you, so that His name will be made known among the nations, right? His salvation among all men. So thank you so much for spending some time with us today.
Oh, thank
Bill,
you, Chad.
thanks for traveling all the way from Arizona. Thanks for getting to hang out with me again after so many years. It's so
Amen.
exciting. And for those of you who are listening, I hope that you've enjoyed our chat, and you're welcome to discover perspectives for yourself. We'll be hosting it again in the spring of 2025. And if you have any interests, go to the perspectives.org website or reach out to me here at FBC Boerne. But again, why are we here? It's so that we can use all the things that God has given us for His kingdom among the nations. Have a wonderful day, and God bless.
Thanks.
We are so thankful that you joined our podcast today. We would love to hear any feedback you may have for us. Remember, Psalm 67 says, "May God be gracious to us and bless us, and make His face shine on us, so that your ways may be known on earth and your salvation among all nations." Don't forget why the Lord blesses us. It's so that we can be a blessing to those around us. Until next time, God bless.